So I've just looked at Facebook's news feed and an Al Jazeera report. Al Jazeera in the last sort of 15 years has grown very fast as an international news network. It's been pretty controversial at times, as all big news networks are. But anyway, this report was about a Palestinian fighter who got injured in an exchange with Israelis. Not killed, injured. And I think this was a rather strange thing to be leading on. When you consider all the conflicts around the world, many of them a lot bloodier than what's happening in the Holy Land, it seems very strange that they would devote an entire news item to one guy getting injured. A few days ago, 75 people were massacred in the Central African Republic. I don't know if they were Muslims or Christians, but the point is, clearly that's a much more bloody situation than what's happening in the Holy Land these days. In the Holy Land these days, occasionally there might be one or two deaths, and there's quite a lot of injuries. But compared to some other conflicts around the world, it is actually a low-scale conflict. So it seems very strange that Al Jazeera devotes so much time to covering that conflict. And I cannot help but wonder, is it because Al Jazeera has a political agenda here? It's an Arab network, it's based in Doha in Qatar, based in an Arab country, and I cannot help but think that Al Jazeera is guilty of showing absolutely no balance in its coverage of this conflict. Now, overall, I think Al Jazeera is quite a good network. They cover a lot of reports from around the world, from all sorts of situations. They do cover human rights issues, they do cover a lot of important stories. And for the most part, especially outside the Middle East region, their coverage is quite neutral and professional. But when it comes to the Israeli-Arab conflict, the bias is so intense from Al Jazeera that it's almost laughable. Pretty much 99% of their coverage in the Holy Land is Israel are the bad guys, the Arabs are the good guys, and it's just very pathetic, really. I mean, why devote an entire headline to one guy getting injured? It's very dubious when you consider there's much bloodier conflicts around the world. And it really seems like Al Jazeera is being PR agents for Hamas or for other armed groups that are constantly attacking Israel. Why don't they occasionally show the Israeli side? Why don't they, okay, they do interview Israelis sometimes, but the nature of their reporting, the wording that they use, is clearly biased. It is clearly one-sided. And I can't help but think they're just promoting an agenda here. The fact of the matter is, there are far bloodier conflicts going on in the world. And I'm not saying Al Jazeera doesn't cover them, but it covers them about the same amount as it covers the Holy Land conflict. In fact, probably less. So you can't help but think there is a loss of all sense of proportionality here. Frankly, I'm sick of hearing about the Palestinians. I'm not saying the situation there isn't worth covering, but really it is massively taken out of proportion compared to other conflicts in the world. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of, especially since a lot of the time Palestinian suffering comes from other Palestinians. What Al Jazeera is doing is promoting this vilification of Israel, and they're doing it in a very, very biased way, and I'm really, really tired of it. So, Al Jazeera, overall, I think it's a good network, but when it comes to the coverage of the Holy Land conflict, the bias is just ridiculous. The anti-Israel bias. How often do they scrutinise the rocket attacks on Israel after the Israelis have tried to make peace negotiations? They don't cover that. All they cover is about how terrible the Israelis are. And they promote things like the Israeli apartheid argument, when that is a very debated logic. In fact, a lot of South Africans have taken issue with that analogy. So I just think this bias in the reporting is ridiculous. And Al Jazeera really risks journalistic credibility by constantly taking one side in a conflict.